Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, today we're exploring how drag racing works.
That's my racing sound effects. What do you think?
I think that was a perfect sound effect. It sounds exactly how drag racing sounds.
Fun fact, I shifted too many times.
Because you shifted so many times.
I shifted like 4 times in drag racing. I think they have 2 gears or something like that. Well, we might get to that a little bit later.
How do we even know? It takes like 0.2 seconds for them to finish the race, which is rather impressive. But anyways,
it is.
Luke, I have a little bit about what is drag racing. How about that? Can I start with that? And I'd like to say I want to start. You know why? Because I have nothing else to go off of here, man. Nothing else. Everybody knows I don't know cars. I don't know racing. Like,
you're not a gearhead.
I'm not a gearhead.
Or a grease monkey. Or
I've never changed my own oil.
Have you ever done your own brakes?
I watched someone do my brakes once. I changed a flat tire before.
That was probably difficult.
It was actually very
Before
difficult.
You do that, James, I want to do a little bit of history because I think we kind of need to do this in order.
I love the history. Yes.
I can't believe you didn't do history, or did you?
I was really grumpy when I did this.
Okay,
research.
sorry. So drag racing was actually born in the dry lake beds of the California desert, whatever that means. So think about like back like in the 1930s. Basically, cars were big, heavy, slow. They weren't a lot of fun, right? So right around 1930, these engines started getting a lot bigger. It was super easy, and they were super simple to work on. They were hitting speeds of like 100 miles an hour. So what do you do as a 17-year-old kid with nothing else to do? You take that
video games.
No, you take that thing out to the desert where it's really flat so you don't wreck and kill yourself, and you drive as fast as you can into a straight line. So this essentially it started out literally as teenagers trying to just outrace each other in their mom and dad's car on the weekends and evenings. And
like Grease, like they
very much like Grease lightning. Exactly.
Grease lightning, yeah.
So it got super popular right around the early 40s. And one of the first organized races was actually in 1949 at the Goleta Air Base in California. And this guy by the name of Wally Parks actually founded NHRA, which is the current organization. And that stands for the National...
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It stands for the National Hot Rod Association. And Wally he did this because they were just racing in the streets, and he was trying to figure out a way to make this safer and a little more organized. And also he wanted to make a little bit of money, apparently.
Who doesn't? Yeah. Fun fact about this, Wally, it became drag racing because Wally was actually a drag queen. And that's how that got its name.
Really?
Fun fact, yeah.
I thought you were going to say that he was the founder of Wally World from the famous movie. That
would have been an even better lie.
Vacation.
National Lampoon's Vacation. Yeah.
Still one of my favorite movies of all time.
Both are equally untrue.
So basically, this was founded in 1951, and literally over the years, it's grown into there's over 15 different classes. I'll review a couple of my favorites. But they got, crazy sponsors. Camping World is their premier sponsor for the last few years. And literally it's a multi-million-dollar organization, with prize money and all the different things. So it's super boring to watch, my opinion. Like you're like, okay, over. Okay.
Yeah, over. I don't get it.
It's almost as bad as NASCAR, just driving in a loop. But
this is way better than NASCAR in my opinion, because it lasts like seconds.
It is.
And then you don't have to spend your whole day watching them drive in a circle. You can spend your whole day watching a bunch of people drive in a straight line.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that better?
Okay. It is better. So you said you had a little bit of information on what is drag racing.
Man, do I have so much information on it. It is fascinating. It's a competition, Luke, between 2 vehicles. Like you said, they sit there, they drive in a straight line. Really fascinating for a quarter mile, unless it's an eighth of a mile. But typically it's a quarter mile stretch that they drive down. It's a super like highly monitored like track that they go down, though, to try and figure out who crosses the finish line first. And normally you don't think it's that difficult to figure out, but these suckers are moving so fast, like hundreds of miles per hour, that it actually is really difficult. There's all sorts of other rules that we can get into later that kind of like can even the playing field as well, which I think is a little bizarre. But generally speaking, two cars line up. Whoever crosses the line first wins. The time it takes the vehicle to go from the start to the finish line is known as the elapsed time, or ET, like the extraterrestrial, but different.
I gotcha.
And this measures the performance and determines handicaps for the competition, if that's the kind of competition that you're going. So you do, there's like a straight head-to-head one, and then there's a handicap system, which we can get into later. It's kind of bizarre. So two types, like we're saying, heads up. That's the one where it's just two standing next to each other, sitting next to each other. And then the handicapped one, heads up racing. Both cars leave the start at the same time and both finish. Whoever finishes first is the winner. The handicapped racing, I think, is really interesting because the goal is like this one might be more interesting. The goal is to predict how many seconds it's going to take you to get your car to the finish line, and then try to run as close to that time as possible without going more quickly, aka breaking out, is what the people that are in the know call it.
I knew nothing about this.
Yeah, so like it doesn't necessarily matter that my car can go like 4 miles per hour. These all go really fast,
yeah.
But you have that handicap in there based off of your previous runs. And so now the goal is just to try and come in at, if I say it's going to take me 10 seconds, come in as close to 10 seconds with my handicap as possible.
Interesting.
So that's really kind of cool. So whoever comes closest to that time wins.
I assumed that like the handicap race was like whoever like had to be handicapped, they would like put like a kettlebell like in between the driver's seat.
Add weights.
Yeah, so you just add weights, so it's more equivalent to the other vehicle. And then it's more like driver mano y mano kind of driving, and you kind of take the, you know, one car's way better, just add weight. I guess that's not the case.
No, I guess that's not the case.
Okay.
But this is just to kind of have to allow cars that can go different speeds to race one another. So the slower vehicle gets a head start and it's trying to go cross the line. It's 10 seconds. The other one waits for a while. It gets to go, and then it tries to cross in 3 seconds and see who gets there closest. So that's my whole breakdown as to what is drag racing at a super high level. Your two options and a few other things.
So I'd like to drop in some fun facts periodically, because
you are full of fun facts all the time.
Did you know that
I didn't?
Every single time they do a run, they rebuild the engine from scratch?
You're a liar.
Nope.
Luke, you're a dirty liar, and I don't.
So this is ultra high end, like big money races. So they do a run. Oh, that's from our boy
JP. Our
nice
boy JP. You like that?
Thanks, JP. Yeah, every single time they do a run, they actually, as soon as the run's over, they start rebuilding the engine for the next run. Because they very rarely, because it's all time based. So let's say there's 20 top fuel dragsters. They all race against time. So when you're head to head, it's not like I got to race against this person and beat them, and then race against a different person and beat them. It's all time based.
So you only race one time per
event, and then they tear your engine apart and they rebuild your engine. Now, I imagine some of the lower classes where you don't have the money or the ability, you probably race multiple times, like some of the pro stock stuff where it's like kind of a stockish vehicle. And we'll talk about the classes in a minute, but the stuff you see on TV, the big fat wheels in back, the skinny wheels up front, like the traditional, when you think of drag racing, they race one time per event. It's based off of time. They rebuild the engine after every run.
That's interesting. Okay.
You didn't know that?
I'm going to act like I didn't, but I for sure knew that. No, I didn't. And I still don't know if I believe you.
Okay.
Do you want to add any other fun facts in there real quick before we take a first break?
No, I think that's probably good. I'm going to pepper them in as we go.
Oh, I love that, peppering them in. All right. So I think it is time for us to take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I have to assume it's the National Hot Rod Association.
With Wally? No, it is not Wally's Association. We have a better sponsor, Luke.
Who do we got?
We have the Big Compute Podcast. Take a listen.
What can computational science tell us about the tsunami generated by the biggest earthquake to ever hit Europe? Before you know it, everything is shaking, and shaking loudly. What makes the coronavirus so contagious?
It's the machine that literally will latch on to your human cell and ultimately infect you.
And what was it like when a massive act of cyber warfare stopped an entire country in its tracks? Their ATM greets you with red text over a black screen. This is really starting to creep you out. These are just some of the questions being answered every day through the power of computing. And on season 2 of the Big Compute podcast, we transport you to the heart of these stories, giving you a first-hand look at how computational science is changing our world. Find the Big Compute podcast wherever you get your audio, or visit bigcompute.org.
All right, that sounds amazing. Go check them out. We also have a shout out, though. I don't want to forget our fans. Today we have Grant T, who wrote in. Says, I'm a 30-plus year communications engineer from Australia.
Okay.
As
Good
in
day.
RF communications. That was well done. You're like a crocodile hunter. With most of my work being in the military, now serving as a government employee, but we won't go into that. Needless to say, I find the podcast both informative and highly entertaining, with the odd, questionable fact to keep me on my toes.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that so much.
Most everything we say does need to be verified, just for the record.
Absolutely.
We say that. Yeah, we don't hide that.
And just for you, Luke, he ended it with a go Mud Ducks.
Nice.
Yeah. So Grant, thank you for writing in. Really appreciate it. Cracked me up. I always love the go Mud Ducks.
So I'd love to hear from Grant. Is it true that Australia
this is gonna get
was basically
offensive.
a prison for
It's for sure
England?
true. Everybody knows that.
So that means everybody that it was born in Australia, their parents and grandparents way back when were criminals.
Maybe not everyone, but
a vast majority.
I think a lot of them, yeah.
Other than the indigenous people.
Other than the indigenous people and the kangaroos.
That's
yeah.
interesting. Like, at what point do you let them out? and then they get married and have kids, and the next thing you know, they're not criminals. That's interesting. Okay.
Fun fact about drag racing tying into Australia: the fastest drag racer can actually travel across the water from Australia to America. That's how fast they go. On top of the wall. This isn't true, Luke. This is all I have today.
Oh my goodness.
If any of you actually know anything about drag racing, if you want a sweet shout out, if you want some stickers, if you want to give us a go Mud Ducks, anything like that, how about you go ahead and email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, give us reviews. And as always, you can tell your smart devices to play the Unprofessional Engineering podcast.
I love telling my smart devices to do that. Can I talk about the track a little bit?
Ooh,
and the
I
bits
love the
that
track.
go with it. Okay, so the track, like I said, is a 1/4 mile long,
Or an
unless it's not. And it's about 30 feet wide, but it has other components, Luke, and I did not know this. So one is the burnout, which is AKA water. So that burnout box is an area reserved for vehicles to enter that have been sprayed down with water to help reduce friction as the driver initiates a burnout, just like what you were doing. How did it go again? Okay, perfect.
You know why they do a burnout?
I do, but go ahead.
So they do a burnout to warm up the tires. They have to get to a certain temperature for traction purposes. So if you think of like rubber, when it's colder, it's firmer and it might slip on the track. So whenever they warm the tires up, the rubber compounds in the tires is really specific, and it becomes, I'm not going to say tacky, but it definitely has more
Like
grip to it. Yeah. Tacky. I see what you did there.
Yeah, clever. If you're tired of listening to my ineptness towards drag racing, maybe go over and listen to our episode about Charles Goodyear, who invented the tire.
Tire.
He didn't. Spoiler, he didn't. But it is a very cool episode about rubber. Another piece, Luke, the pre-stage beam. So each vehicle's front wheels enter this area. It'll break the pre-stage infrared beam, which triggers the Christmas tree's pre-staged lights, alerting the drivers that they're closing in on staging.
Right?
That's the little thingy. It has all sorts of lights, and it does look like a Christmas tree, but that's kind of like how you know to go, right?
Okay.
Staged beam / starting line. I figure we can pretty much figure this one out. But again, this is another infrared beam. So there's a lot of technology going in just to get this thing started. In each lane that controls the starting and the timing of the race, triggering an independent lane timer for ET or elapsed time. And unless both drivers are fully staged, the race can't start. The staged beam will also trigger a red light if a false start takes place, which I think, Luke, you would do because you're a dirty cheater.
Oh, I am a dirty cheater.
Yeah. And the staged beam is located just 6 inches past the pre-stage beam. So you got to be pretty good. Maybe
And
they
those
just
things
push
are
you up
long.
there.
Like, I mean,
Oh my goodness, they're like 9,000 feet long.
Like whenever you park your car, you hit stuff all the time because you're like looking over the hood of your truck because you're so short. Could you imagine if you had like 20 feet in front of you and you had to like pull up to a line?
You know that parking garage in Bakery Square?
It's terrible.
I've hit that wall so many times. My goodness. Interval timers. So there's 5 intervals along the track where the time and speed are recorded. So like I said, this isn't just like some guy looking at the finish line like, yep, I think you won. There's 5 different timers to record this stuff, which includes 60 foot, 330 foot, an 1/8 mile, 1,000 foot, and of course, quarter mile, assuming it's a quarter mile track. Speed traps and elapsed time, ET, clock beams. See, I'm going to just keep going back to ET because it's like my only thing. The last of the infrared beams is the most important, right? The first is located at 66 feet before the finish line and measures top speed. The second is located at the finish line and shuts off the elapsed time and top speed clocks, triggering the win light. So that's kind of cool. And that's it, Luke. That's all my other parts that I had for the track.
So I have an interesting fact about the track is
oh my goodness.
The top fuel, like the big ones, so not like the pro stock
the top fuel
stuff,
dragsters,
but like
TFEs.
the big ones, like top fuel, funny car, that sort of stuff. They have no suspensions in them. And the reason why they have no suspensions is because a drag racing strip supposedly, and I imagine it varies from drag strip to drag strip, is less than 1 degree from one end to the other angular wise. Like it is perfectly flat. They kind of clean it and sweep it and make sure that's like perfectly flat because you don't want gravity like if it was uphill a little bit or downhill or even side to side. So they don't need suspensions because it's literally like driving on like a piece of glass, perfectly flat.
Wow.
Huh?
That's impressive.
I think we need to talk about the classes, James.
Now, I have a question.
Shoot.
You know, all glass is not perfectly flat, right?
Yeah. Actually,
most glass be more like it's perfectly smooth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Smooth.
Just
perfectly smooth.
Right. Go ahead.
Let's start. So there are 15 different classes, and I'm going to spend the next 47 minutes talking about each one in detail. I kid. We'll talk about the ones that you probably know and see and are familiar. And then I have one that's crazy. So the first one is top fuel. This is what you think of when you think
the best. Yeah. Other than the name, funny car is way cooler.
Yeah, the super skinny car, has the big wing, big tires, small tires up front. Doesn't resemble a vehicle at all. It looks like a rocket with wheels. So these things are the fastest accelerating machines in the world. They have up to 11,000 horsepower.
Oh my goodness.
These things can cover a drag strip in 3.7 seconds and reach speeds of over 330 miles per hour.
How many kilometers per hour is that?
I don't know, about 27, something like that.
That's fair. Okay.
They are all powered by the exact same supercharged, fuel-injected 500 cubic inch engine adapted from the famed Chrysler Hemi engine.
So, Luke, this is when I started getting really annoyed with this topic.
Yeah, they all use the same engine.
You think F1, which we haven't done yet, and I'm sorry, everyone. Like, that's all about the engineering, right? The fine tuning and these tweaks. This is like, as I read it, I know there's more to it, but it's like you drop in the same junk, go the fastest, and it really started to annoy me.
Yeah, and they have but NASCAR's like this too. There's so many regulations that they try to make the cars as equal as possible. So it's the little things that you can adjust.
Yeah.
They can burn up to 15 gallons of nitromethane during a single run. So this isn't like you pull up to BP or GetGo and you're getting some gas. This stuff is nitromethane. It's, way more combustible than regular gas. There's a lot more energy in the fuel because it's nitromethane.
That is fascinating to me that they can burn that much.
Top fuel cars, they're 25 feet long and they weigh about 2,300 pounds. The next one, your favorite, the funny car. So these are really small and clowns jump out of each side.
Like 20 of them. Yeah.
Oh, I hate clowns.
Do you?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can't stand them. Deathly afraid of them. Kind of like Kramer in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So they're similar to Top Fuel, but they do have a shorter wheelbase. They vaguely resemble the production car that they are representing. So whether it's Ford or GM or Chrysler or whatever,
they have the logo and that's about it.
That's pretty much it. But basically the whole front of the car, the reason it's called a funny car is the carbon fiber body tips up at an angle. Driver gets in and it goes back down. So it's just basically a carbon fiber shell over top of that. Very similar speeds. They're a little bit slower than the Top Fuel cars.
Important question about funny cars.
Shoot.
Do you like Laffy Taffy? And have you ever found one of the jokes included on Laffy Taffy to be funny?
So I don't know if I've ever had Laffy Taffy, so I'm guessing no.
If any of you have a good Laffy Taffy joke, please email it in.
Pro stock. So the word kind of assumes that this is a little bit of a car that's stock. So these far more resemble the stock cars. Typically, the engine is popping out of the hood. They do all kinds of super sophisticated things with the chassis. This car does have a suspension. Because it's kind of more of a stock-ish car. These ones are about 1,300 horsepower, so far less than Top Fuel. Yeah. And they go about quarter mile, 6.5 seconds, and they get about 210 miles an hour. Pro stock.
210.
Yeah, so I think I listed that first one wrong. I must have cut and pasted incorrectly. So this next one is essentially a stock vehicle with modifications to the engine. So superchargers, fatter tires. These ones also run, they're in like the 7-second range and they're reaching like 190 miles per hour. And then finally, the craziest of them all, this thing isn't even a car, James. This is pro stock motorcycles. So motorcycle, right? Super low to the ground. And they put like wheelie bars on them so you don't like fly up in the air. So these are highly modified cars. They run 6.8 seconds at 195 miles an hour. And everybody from, Harley to Kawasaki to Suzuki, the engine sizes, there's a lot more ability to kind of choose what you want to do. I think the only thing that they have is a maximum cubic inch for the engine size, and they all use the exact same fuel. Other than that, it's all aerodynamics and engineering that goes into it. But could you imagine on a motorcycle going 195 miles?
I don't want to go any miles per hour on a motorcycle. So no, I cannot.
What's the fastest you've ever driven personally, you driving a vehicle?
I think maybe 110 to 113.
Isn't a Corvette, wasn't it?
Yeah. And you know what's bad about that is it was literally it was going from Ohio to Pennsylvania. I had stopped to like do the Easy Pass thing.
Yep.
And then like just merging back on was like it was like no time, and I was like, oh boy, like this could be dangerous. So yeah. What about you?
Mine's similar. My brother had a supercharged Pontiac. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but he let me borrow it one time. He doesn't listen to the podcast, so it's all right. I never told him I did this, but I got about 110, 115 on 79 going south to Washington, PA.
Nice.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I'm afraid to go faster than that just because I don't want to get picked up and lose my license, that sort of thing. Luke, I think we need to take a break for this week's Luke's rant.
Okay, so this rant ties in perfectly, James. Thank you for the setup. So this is less of a rant, but more of the more you know. Learn from me, kids.
You're really good with these public service announcements.
I tried. So when I was a teenager and I was in my 20s, I did a lot of speeding, like lots and lots of speeding. And
a lot of speed.
And, thank God I never got into an accident. Nobody ever got hurt. Nothing bad ever happened. but I got to 11 points on my driver's license twice.
Don't you lose it at what, 13
So-
or at 11, or you have to go to school?
So I have to take a class. So I had to take this class twice. So I got up to 11 points, go to a judge, fight the ticket, yada, 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 take a class. They dropped some points off. I got back up to 11 points like 6 months later and fought it again. And the judge was like, yeah, you got to keep the points. My insurance was
Oh,
through
my
the
goodness.
roof. You can only imagine. So fun fact, if you don't call or change your policy, they won't find out. So just like leave your policy alone, like unless they have to do like a new policy, they typically don't find out. But here's my, like, the more you know, be careful. So I was lucky. I was really blessed not to hurt anybody or get into a car accident or anything like that. But I mark that as probably the stupidest stuff that I did in most of my life. Like I've done a lot
of stupid stuff.
a lot of stupid stuff. But if you think about what you can do, I mean, you're in basically a giant steel wrecking ball driving 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. And the ability to just hurt yourself or hurt somebody else like instantaneously is kind of crazy. So my kind of, I'll say, lesson learned is learn from me. Don't do this. I was super lucky that nothing bad ever happened to me, but speeding now I'm like the exact opposite. Like when I'm doing 35 in a 35 and someone's on my tail, I'm like, hey jerk, I'm driving the speed limit. What are you doing? So don't speed, kids. Don't speed, parents. You know, you'll get there when you get there. You know, they're there for a reason. So be safe.
Speed kills.
Don't drink and drive.
Don't drink and drive. That's a very good point. I'd like to complain real quick.
Oh no.
If I am in the Corvette, I guarantee, even if I'm driving from my house to the grocery store, which is like a 10-minute drive, somebody's going to pull up to a light and just like hammer on the gas and be like, yeah, my Civic just blew you out of the water. And I'm like, that's super cool. Like, you know, that's great. I'm trying not to even push the gas pedal down so that I don't go flying, but you know, totally fine. So people don't pull up to lights and like try and race other people. That's just stupid.
You know, you got the podcast money when the sentence coming out of your mouth says, well, when I'm driving the Corvette, you know
this is a strange situation.
You got podcast money when that's a sentence that comes out of your mouth.
All right, let's move on, Luke.
All righty.
Real quick, do you have more? Lots more?
I just want to do those ones, and then I got stuff on the engines a little bit. I got stuff on the tires and a few more
you
fun
continue
facts.
on then, because the engine was where I was headed, and I did want to say that it's a pretty impressive thing. And the supercharger, pretty impressive. Like there's a lot of awesome engineering that goes into it. I poo-pooed it a little bit. I'm sorry, but go ahead, Luke.
So one of the first things that I always wondered, like I was on the NHRA website, or is that right? Yeah. And I was like, why are they all supercharged? Like how did they like cars, like consumer vehicles are turbocharged. Like my little Volkswagen is a turbocharged, you know, it's a little 4-cylinder. But so consumer cars, like day-to-day drivers, are turbocharged, but these race cars are supercharged. And I never understood why the difference. So the reason being is superchargers have the ability to have instantaneous power because superchargers are physically connected with some kind of crank arm to the engine. So when the engine starts spinning, the supercharger is spinning up instantly as well. Turbochargers, there's a delay. It's called turbo lag. So if you've ever driven a turbocharged car and you hammer the gas, it's kind of like it takes off and then you can hear the turbo spin up and then it starts forcing the exhaust gas in. It's called turbo lag.
Did we do an episode on turbocharged vehicles?
I think we did.
I know we talked about this somewhere.
I'm pretty sure we did. It's so crazy.
Someone go search that out.
Yeah. So they don't use them for racing. Also, superchargers, gasoline, not that it matters, 15
this is
gallons
back
in
to
a
that
single
yeah
run, but they are not efficient in any way, shape, or form, and the power increase is instantaneous. So what does this turbocharger do, just really high level, and then we can move on to the rest of your engine stuff? A supercharger basically takes cold intake air, and most superchargers nowadays are what are called screw turbochargers. So imagine two screws that pull air in, and the air goes into that screw path, and it compresses the air to a point where it's above atmospheric pressure. So you have this super dense, cold air that gets thrown into the ignition chamber with additional fuel, and you just get instantaneous, like amazing power that you don't have to wait for. That's the benefit. That's why they're supercharged. That's why they're not turbocharged. And high level, cold, compressed air, extra gas, big booms, lots of horsepower.
Yeah, so a little bit of a complaint. The supercharger does have to be a 1471 type roots blower, which goes back to the whole like, man, this is the exact thing that it has to be. But these are just stupid impressive things, right? It has to be fitted with a 200 pound per square inch burst plate, which is kind of crazy to me. And at maximum pressure, it takes about 1,000 horsepower to drive the supercharger. Like, just the power going on here is mind-blowing. Like, I don't want to be in one of these things, that's for sure.
So my Tacoma has an optional supercharger you can buy from Toyota. It's an actual factory add-on. It's like $9,000. And I always thought, oh, I'd want to put a supercharger on my Tacoma. I'm like, yeah, how stupid would that be?
It would be. Have you ever lifted it? Remember the very first episode we did was how to lift a truck or something about lifting trucks?
Everybody I've talked to said the minute you touch suspension on a vehicle, like your tires and alignment and the way it rides on the road, it just ruins it.
I think we had multiple people write in with that too. Okay. You want to talk about the engine a little bit?
Yeah, you can go. I had superchargers. I had nothing on the engine. I just had superchargers and turbochargers.
So again, I say how nothing really custom is happening here, right? So the top fuel dragsters, the only ones that I care about other than the funny named funny cars, are based off of a second generation Chrysler RB Hemi, which you've mentioned already, but super powerful, right? But the process of making these is what I found to be extra fascinating. Like, the block is machined from like a solid forged piece of aluminum. It's press fitted, ductile iron liners, all of these super cool things. The cylinder heads are machined from aluminum. The intake valves are forged out of solid titanium. Pistons are forged out of aluminum. They're Teflon coated to prevent gailing during the high thrust loading. Like, this stuff is just unbelievable. Like, the process,
some crazy engineering.
It might be all dropped in the same, we'll say, with like minor tweaks here and there, but the engineering that actually goes into the production of the engine and the different pieces, and then the special care, we'll say, that has to go into the design of each of these really is fascinating.
Well, so one of the biggest things,
I shouldn't complain.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is I forget what year it was like 1974, 72, something like that. It was this horrific accident.
Yeah.
So the engines used to be in front of the driver. If you look at some of the old pictures, it's basically this enormous engine, and then about 3 feet, the driver. It's like he couldn't even see around the engine. And there was this terrible accident. The guy that was driving loses his right foot or his left foot when this thing blew up. And he swore that he was going to come up with a rear engine dragster that could win and compete. And he actually did. And he actually drove it with 1 foot, apparently. But if you think about just like the safety engineering that goes into this, like the ability to take this nitromethane gas, jam it into a 500 cubic inch engine that's supercharged, and like not blow up whenever you hit the gas. It's kind of crazy.
It is crazy. It really is. I don't have any more that I want to cover, Luke. I thought you might have a couple other things.
I have tires. So, so this is obviously, one of the most important things with any racing, whether it's, F1, NASCAR, drag racing, motorcycles, whatever it is, are the tires. Because if you think about it, there's literally like a handful of square inches that is actually making contact with the ground. And with drag racing, it's obviously far more because you got those big, huge, fat tires. So the tires have a 36 inches tall. They are 17 and a half inches wide, and they weigh about 50 pounds. There's actually a part number. So if you wanted to order these from Goodyear, they all use Goodyear, it's part number 2747, and they're about $900 each, roughly. And guess how many
you want to sponsor
us,
Goodyear, send us some tires. Thanks.
Well, I don't know if I'd want these tires because guess how many runs they can do?
1.
8.
Oh, 8's pretty good.
So you're talking $2,000 every 8 runs.
Didn't you tell me you have to totally redo the engine every run?
Which is,
and now you're complaining about $2,000 in tires?
Well, okay, so what happens? You do your burnout, you warm up the tires, right? You get the tires all nice and sticky and warm.
All sticky.
Then they have something called the squat. So this is when
squats.
the driver hits the gas, takes off, and you see those super cool slow-mo pictures. The tire the sidewalls actually bend. So the center hub of the tire turns at a torque so fast that the tire itself starts to wrinkle. This is called the squat. So what happens when it does the squat, the tire actually gets skinnier. These only run about 6 to 10 PSI roughly. Your car's probably like 35 PSI. Because they're super flat.
Yeah.
The radius shrinks by about 6 inches total.
That's
and what happens is it creates about a 250 square inch surface contact for takeoff. So when that tire deforms for takeoff, like 250 square inches is actually in contact versus, maybe 100 square inches. So it doubles the contact.
That's so crazy.
After that happens, there's about 4 Gs when that happens. Just keep that in mind. Then the growth happens. So after the car launches, they call it, the inertia of that tire spinning, it actually grows by like 2 inches in diameter, and the surface area in contact actually reduces because the tire gets skinnier and taller. And then finally, within that 2 or 3 second time frame, it starts to equalize a little bit. Then they hit the brakes, and the exact opposite happens. The tires wrinkle, the surface area increases, the chutes deploy, and then the car slows down. How crazy is that? Have you seen those pictures of the tires
I'm not
wrinkling?
interested. Yeah, that was kind of like the most fascinating part of watching the videos for this.
So when I was in high school, I had this pickup truck. And have you ever heard of recap tires? So it's where they take an old bald tire and they basically glue a recap on it. They're super cheap. They're like $30 a piece. So I used to run recaps on my tires all the time. Well, recaps routinely just spin off of the tire. And I forget where I was. I was messing around. I probably pulled up to someone in a Corvette. I had my big blue Dodge Power Ram, and I jammed the gas in my right recap, and the gear spun off and ripped. And then I had this bald tire with like, wires and, metal sticking out of it. And I had to go get another recap. So,
that's funny. Awesome. Anything else, Luke?
A couple fun facts before we wrap it up. The rear wing has the ability to produce 4,000 to 8,000 pounds of downforce. So
crazy.
If someone was laying there, it would kill them. Like if you were just the downforce of 8,000 pounds, whenever they decelerate, it's 7 Gs versus the 4 Gs on takeoff.
Ain't no
and the current top fuel drag record, I don't know what the number was that you said earlier, for the quarter mile is 3.667 seconds. So this thing could go.
Isn't it at like 320 something or
so this
like
thing
that?
can go, that's a quarter mile. So this thing could go a full mile in 12 seconds ish, 13 seconds ish. That
Could run out of gas first, for sure.
like what's my 5K time?
4 seconds, 5 seconds.
That's all I got.
Oh gosh. Yeah, these things are impressive. I may have poo-pooed it at the beginning, but these really are crazy engineering marvels. How about
They are.
that?
They
How
are
about
a
that?
marvel.
All right. Well, if any of you'd like to correct us on things we got wrong, inevitably, man, I just got a monster email about things we got wrong. If you want to tell us about, your drag racing experiences, if you drive a Corvette and you get annoyed by people as well, why don't you email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com. And until next time,
See ya.